start the presentation, I would like to go through some practicalities. We have tried to mute all the microphone and set all the cameras to off for quality purpose. If you have any questions, you're free to use the chat function and write down all the questions there. I will monitor the chat and write all the questions down. We'll also be recording this webinar for later use, so just for info. And let's go over to the agenda, Mirela. We'll start off by just saying welcome, which I'm doing right now. Then I will hand over to Jussi, who will go through the Nordic collaboration and present the key messages from the report. And then Julie from Startnet will talk a little bit about the transition in the system. And then we have Antti, who will present a bit about the Condom project. The transition is an initiative to manage the transition over to a power electronic interface device dominated Nordic power system. Then Cecile will talk a little bit about bilateral connections, and then hopefully we will have time for some questions, which I will pick up from the chat. So thank you again, everyone, for joining, and I'll hand it over to Jussi.
Okay, good morning to you all. So my name is Jussi Urinsalo, I'm from Fingrid, and I'm the chairman of the Nordic Planning Group. And the next slide will show the Nordic collaboration, what kind of other groups we do have. So the main body of our cooperation is organized within 4 committees which report directly to the Nordic CEOs. So we have a market steering group, and then we have a system operation group called Regional Group Nordic, which is also an NGDP group at the same time. Then we have an IT group, because the performing of IT systems is becoming more and more important, and it's a big part of all the market development projects, for example. And then we have Nordic Planning Group. And our main task in the Nordic Planning Group is to prepare this biannual publication called Nordic Grid Development Perspective, which we are publishing right now. But that is not the only way we cooperate when it comes to grid planning. We have bilateral studies going on. For example, Fingrid and Svenska Kraftnät are working on Aurora Line 1 and already number 2. And as all the other countries are doing the same. But then we have some Baltic Sea level cooperation also. And we try to avoid parallel processes so that we would be publishing grid plans on Nordic level and on Baltic Sea level and on European level. So NGDP is the main body which publishes grid plans also on European level, on Baltic Sea level, and they publish adequacy analyses also frequently. So we have a little bit of freedom what this Nordic grid development perspective includes. And the next slide shows what kind of reports have we been publishing lately. So back in 2017, we told about how the production and consumption are developing in Nordic countries, what kind of projects we see being most important across the borders between us, and we identified 5 cross-border corridors to be studied. And then 2 years later, 2019, we updated the scenarios and updated what's happening with the studies on the identified corridors. And then 2 years ago, we updated again what's happening with the studies, how are they progressing. We presented a joint scenario for production and consumption development in each of the countries, identified some future price differences, and made some focus area studies on certain issues. And as the grid development is usually a bit slow, it doesn't happen in 1 year, it's quite natural that every year we do not pop up with a set of new investments. It takes time to develop the projects between the countries. And again, we are now this year telling about what's happening with the projects, what's happening in each of the countries, what kind of prognosis we have for the production and the consumption. But then a new part this time is this chapter number 3, which tells about the transition to this new power system where the rotating synchronous machines are being replaced by converter-connected power generation. And that makes a big difference on how the system is behaving, especially during faults and special situations. And that is actually the main part of our study this time. And in the coming presentations, we cannot go too deep into the whole report. So we sort of give a glimpse of what's in the report. But the key messages of the whole stuff are like this. It's a bit small text, but it tries to tell you that we have a long history and good cooperation between the Nordic countries, and we have all been able to build upon that when making the energy transition in each of the Nordic countries. But now the energy transition is becoming so very fast, and the change is so big that we need to work together more than before. We need to identify all the transmission corridors we might be missing in the future. We need more flexibility into our Nordic system, and then we need to be able to control the technical challenges, and especially those coming with the power electronic connected devices, especially the power production. And why are we doing all this? It's because that we need to be competitive. So the investments, the Nordic countries need to be a good place for investments as it comes to power production and power consumption. And with this cooperation, we are making it possible, and we are inviting more and more investors into Nordic countries. But this was in short and telling about the contents, but now we are digging deeper into each of the chapters. And chapter number 2 was called High Pace Towards Net Zero Emissions, telling about the development in each of the Nordic countries. And that is going to be presented by Julie Gunnerud from Statnett. So Julie, please.
Thank you, Jussi. Yes, hello everyone. I'm Julie Gunnerud. I'm a senior analyst in Statnett, where I'm working with market analysis or power market analysis. And now I've been working with the joint Nordic TSO team, discussing the overall market development in the Nordics. So I will present on how we, the Nordic TSO, sees the development towards 2050. And we have here focused on the development of demand and production and flexibility, as these are the key drivers for the need for grid, both internally in our countries, but also across borders. And the Nordic TSOs, they have a reconciled view on the overall market development. We see that the power market and the power system will play an important role in the energy transition, as the power system enables the fuel switch in many sectors. And this will drive a high power demand, as we see here, in the summarized base scenarios for all the TSOs. So we see here that the TSOs anticipate near a doubling of the total Nordic demand up until 2050. And this growth is driven by the electrification of existing sectors mainly, but also some growth in new industrial sectors such as data centers. The growth, the electrification, we are saying to be both direct through the direct use of power from the grid or through batteries, but also indirect through first the production of hydrogen and then the use of hydrogen in industries that are not so where it's not so easy to use the power directly, such as high heat industries or in heavy transportation. And we see that we have around a doubling of the total power demand, even though we also expect large energy savings and energy efficiency. That is important to note. And hydrogen as we see here, is constitute a large share of the total growth in power demand. Is also, we see that is a central part of the new power system, as this will enable and provide various sources of flexibility, which I will come back to later on. So I can move on to the next slide. So the growth in the total power demand is mainly met by a growth in wind and solar power, which we see are to be the largest sources of new energy production in the Nordics. We expect the growth in onshore wind power to continue, as it is still the cheapest and the fastest ways to increase the energy production, and we see that it's still large potential. As we move closer to 2030 and 2040, we see that onshore wind power will be complemented with more offshore wind power as this technology becomes more mature and when it's more sites prepared for auctioning and permitting. Solar power is still in the early phase, but we anticipate a rapid increase in the installed capacity, almost up to the level of offshore wind capacity. But as we see in the total power production, the energy produced will not be able to compete with offshore wind, as the capacity factor for solar power is much lower than for offshore wind. And hydropower has played a very important role in the Nordic power system for a long time, and it will continue to do so, as it both delivers energy volumes and adjustable power production. However, we anticipate only a small growth in the hydropower, as there is not that much remaining potential. Nuclear is another large source of energy production in the Nordic system, and extension and construction of new plants are being debated a lot lately. And we anticipate that the nuclear capacity will remain fairly stable over the time period due to long planning and construction times. And in the long run, we could see that technology advancement in, for instance, SMR could help to maintain the capacity also. Yeah, in total, we see that there's a large growth in demand and intermittent production across the Nordics, which leads to high hourly fluctuations in the power flow, depending on the weather. And the power flow could also will also depend on the regional energy balances across the Nordics, and thus the degree of collocation of demand and production. For instance, if locating an industry more or less alongside a wind power production, or in the same price area as the wind power production, will to some extent dampen the impact of the rest of the power system, and thus the flow, and thus the need for grid. And we see this effect even though the profile of demand and production is not the same for all hours, because we have some additional flexibility in the Nordic system, for instance, from reservoir hydro, which dampens these effects. So, and in total, we anticipate to a rather large extent, so a collocation of production and consumption, as the price signals will provide relevant investment signals to do so. But even though we have a degree of collocation of demand and flexibility, there will be a massive need for more flexibility in the system when the demand is very high and there's a lot of intermittent power production. Reservoir hydro has been essential in the Nordics, but as already noted, we expect little growth in this due to small remaining potential. So we would need additional sources of flexibility. Demand flexibility has large potential, but it's hard to estimate how large volumes we could reach. However, we're seeing more volatile prices, which increases the incentives to invest in to do the necessary adjustments to the power prices and avoid the highest power prices. So we anticipate demand flexibility, especially from electric transport and industries, for instance, power to X or hydrogen production. We see hydrogen as a central source of flex as it can provide flexibility in various ways. Hydrogen can be a sort of low price flexibility in the production of the hydrogen through electrolysis. This entails that it's developed hydrogen storage or hydrogen infrastructure, which may take some time, but that can be obtainable in the more of a long run. And hydrogen can also be a form of energy storage stored as hydrogen or in the form of ammonia or synthetic fuels. And lastly, hydrogen can be a high price flexibility when used as a fuel in peak power plants, in peakers. But last but not least, the transmission grid is still remain to be essential to balance the variations in demand and intermittent production. That is both in the short term and to adjust the seasonal variations. And all the Nordic TSOs are increasing their investment level, both to connect the new demand and production, but also to ensure sufficient capacity between regions in the Nordics. And later on, Cecilia will give a brief update on the Nordic grid development projects. So summarized, the Nordic TSO sees a clear direction towards a climate neutral society. However, we see that there is uncertainty about the magnitude and the pace of the transition, and thus the exact volumes of demand and intermittent production. And also in a system that we anticipate to evolve very rapidly and change very fast, there may arise various challenges as listed here. And these are described more in detail in the report. And these challenges are been identified in earlier work between the TSOs, and the TSOs are in process of addressing these, both individually, but also in collaboration with other Nordic TSOs, both on strategy and on analysis. And this year, the Nordic TSOs have investigated the stability challenges in more depth. That is the challenges that arise when there's an increased share of devices connected to the grid via power electronics, such as wind, solar, batteries. And now I will pass on the word to Antti, who will give an overview on how the common Nordic work has been performed on this stability issues.
Thank you, Julie, and hello to everyone. My name is Antti Harjula, and I've been acting as the convener of the Nordic converter-dominated Nordic System Group, which is a Nordic TSO cooperation on this topic, as introduced by Julie. Other than that, I'm head of Power System Engineering Unit at Fingrid. And going to this topic, what we have identified and what Julie talked about, there's a change in the system which creates challenges in balancing the system, the energy delivered at all times, but then on the other side, the system technical performance when the new generation is connected in a different matter. We started this project 2 years ago and have been looking at what's the current status and how we need to develop the work inside TSOs, the requirements for generators, do we need new kinds of markets, etc. in the future to solve these challenges. So here in this figure, you can see on the left side the traditional synchronous machine dominated power system. So basically for the last 100 or so years, the power system has been based on synchronous machines spinning together with the grid frequency and providing the stability to the system. And then in the recent 20-25 years, there has been an increase in wind and solar being connected to the grid, and that has been changing the system. And now we are in a situation where last year we had the first hour when more power was actually delivered to the Nordic synchronous area by converter connected generation, so wind, solar, battery, HVDC import from other synchronous areas. And we are heading towards the figure on the right side, where during some hours the system is basically, the response is dominated by the power electronics that are connected to the system. So we can go to the next slide. So what does this mean? The traditional generating units, so from hydro, nuclear, other thermal units, it's delivered to the grid by the synchronous generators, and these synchronous generators they have this inherent characteristics that they resist the changes in frequency due to their inertia, and also the changes in voltage. So they have a kind of natural stabilizing impact on the system. And the new generation, wind and solar, but also batteries and the HVDC links, they are connected to the grid by voltage source converters, which they are kind of immune to what happens in the system, in a way that they just try to push the power that is produced by the primary energy, so by wind or solar, and put it in the grid. But of course, they can be controlled in more smarter manners. So in the beginning, it was more like they were just there and they were not. So can we go back to the previous slide still? So it was so that the generation was not causing much impact on the grid due to the small scale and a small proportion. But as it has been increasing, we have seen that we need to get some of the stabilizing characteristics and the support to the grid that has been delivered by synchronous machines earlier. And already now, in some countries, we are requiring, for example, voltage control and fault current injection during faults. But still, when we have this massive increase in the share of the grid following converters, it can cause, for example, oscillations that we have seen in the grid. You can see there the red figure. Or then if the grid is really weak, we can see like voltage distortion, for example. So then going forward. So Julie was showing how the wind and solar generation capacity is increasing. And then that is affecting the different power flow situations and power production situations in the grid. And on the left side here, you can see the duration curves of the share of wind and solar generation in the Nordic synchronous region. So it's increasing overall during the year, but the main thing is it's actually sometimes we will still have situations when barely none of the power is produced by these power electronic connected devices, and in other times in 31, we might even see situations with more than 75% being produced by the wind and solar. And what's also happening, if we pick the peak penetration hour there at the 0, so going back still to the previous slide, we can see how it's split kind of unevenly in the Nordic countries. So in some regions, the penetration level can be up to 100 during the system level peak penetration hour, and in other regions there will be still, like during those hours, also synchronous machines running. And the start, so what does this actually mean? There's this European Migrate R&D project was finished a couple of years ago, where they kind of find that on the system level, if you go above 65%, around 65% power electronic interface generation, then you need new capabilities and solutions to run the system. But we are already seeing some challenges inside certain regions that we are tackling. Okay, now we can go forward. So how is this affecting the stability of the grid with the increase of converters? We have the old school stability classes: frequency stability, rotor angle stability, and voltage stability. Those are affected by the increase because of the different response, and because the generation is at a different location. But now with this new generation, we also have this new stability classes being introduced: resonance stability and converter-driven stability. And to analyze these new stability classes and mitigate these issues, we need to have much more detail, for example, models. And probably some of you are working with the wind power plant projects, and you are seeing more demanding, like requirements for models to be delivered. So this is the reason. In the report, we are explaining those in more detail and showing examples from the Nordic system where we have experienced already some of these issues, or we are seeing them in the studies. So if you are interested in the technical details, please look up in the report. Okay. Next. So in this Nordic collaboration, we have been looking at what are the technical objectives that require Nordic cooperation, and are they system level? So we need to study and look at them on the whole synchronous area level, or are they more like cross-border that we need to consider them bilaterally in certain regions? And I'm not going in detail to all these technical objectives here, but in the report we are opening this a little bit more, and now we are working on mapping these objectives to technical characteristics or capabilities of the grid, and then the ways to ensure that we have adequate capabilities. But I'm just picking one of these. So the first one here. So the system response during fault and recovery phase is managed. So that's something that is really greatly affected by the power electronics interface generation. So for example, when there is a fault, they go to FRT mode. Do they support the grid by fault current? Do they balance the phase voltages? How are they recovering from the fault? What's the active power recovery phase? And these are kind of new things. And when we have more and more of these power electronics in the grid, and also higher penetration in certain areas, so this is a key to make sure that the system is stable in all the faults, and in the recovery from the faults. Also, the same with the short-term frequency stability here. So you can check in the report for more information on these. But then how do we ensure the technical performance of the future Nordic power system? We see that we can categorize these solutions in the 3 boxes, basically. One is grid solutions. So the TSOs can build transmission lines to strengthen the grid, or stabilizing equipment such as synchronous condensers, or STATCOMs, maybe with grid forming control. And other solutions are market-based solutions. For example, an example of those is the FFR, reserve market product, which activates in 1 second. So that kind of solutions. And then the third one is to enhance the power plant technical capabilities. And here I'm talking about those power electronic connected power plants, so that we get more of the stabilizing effect from the power plants, and through the requirements and agreements. For example, it could be that the grid forming control of the converters. So the next one. And basically, we see that it's a combination of those three ways. So we need all of them, and in different time periods to go forward. So the technology is not ready to have everything that we get from the used to get from the synchronous machines, to get those right away from the converter connected generation, but it will be developing. And what are we doing now? We have initiated certain short-term Nordic actions where we enhance the study capabilities in the Nordics. We are, for example, harmonizing the modeling requirements and working on common definition for grid forming. What does it mean to have a grid forming converter and require that? We are working on the legal framework to be able to share the models that we need for the analysis, and also looking at how we can monitor the system together better to also capture these new type of stability events. And parallel to that, we are now working on a so-called Nordic stability roadmap towards a reliable converter-dominated grid. And in this roadmap, we are setting a strategy and action plan for implementation of a set of approaches to mitigate the foreseen challenges. And we expect to deliver the stability roadmap next year. And that comes to the end of my presentation. And next, Cecilie will talk about the bilateral connections and grid development. Thank you.
Thank you, Antti. Yeah, my name is Cecilia, and I work at the NGDP as a system analyst, working with market analysis. And I'm going to present the 2 last chapters of this report in a merge, talking about the bilateral connections and grid development. Just an overview of this. You can look at the report to see the specifics of the projects. So yeah, let's move on to the next slide. So all the Nordic TSOs are massively increasing their investment levels, as previously said also. In the years to come, the transmission grid plays a crucial role in the balancing power production and demand between the TSOs, and both in the Nordics and in the entire system.
So a strong grid is also the key to not only distribute the power where it is needed, but also to allow the balancing support services and stabilizing the measures across regions and over larger geographical distances. And the report provides a status update on ongoing projects and planned investments of significant Nordic impact. And it is separated into two parts. First, the bilateral connections between the Nordic TSOs, and the second, you can just go back. And the second part is the grid development projects internally in the Nordic TSOs, but also in the nearby TSOs. So I will give a quick overview of these parts in this slide here. So there are several ongoing projects and plans for investments and interconnectors, either between the Nordic TSOs or between the Nordic TSOs and nearby TSOs. So that's all the cross-border lines you can see in this map on the left. We also have and all the plans are either under construction or under consideration, and some also in operation already, compared to the last NGDP report. There are also several ongoing projects regarding the internal investments, considering with the purpose of being able to distribute the power where it is needed, to better be able to to handle these challenges throughout the entire Nordic system. Some of them are also either under construction or under consideration, and for internal grid renewals or expansions. There are also a few projects under construction or consideration regarding the energy islands or hybrid connections, connecting large amounts of power production. If you want to take a closer look onto which projects we have mentioned in this report, you can take a look in the report and see what these numbers refer to as projects. So this was just a quick overview of the Nordic projects. And I think we will move on to Johan and the questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Cecile, Julie, Antti, and Jussi, everyone. And everyone out there, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I gave you some more incentives to download it and read it and dig into it. I think it's a great report, and I hope you will find it very useful and interesting. We haven't received that many questions, so feel free to spam us with new questions now. But I can take the first one. It's from Esa Vakilainen, and he says, in my honest opinion, even IEA is now saying that the heavy transport will not be hydrogen based but electric. There is now hydrogen labeled going to heavy transportation. What is the vision there? Does anyone in the team feel that they want to respond to this? Maybe Julie, you look like you're ready. Thank you.
Yeah, I could give a response there, and feel free to complement my response afterwards. I could just start by clarifying what we're meaning by heavy transportation here. I agree that a lot of the on-road transport are going to be more on the electric level now. So what we mean is mostly the transport going into the shipping and aviation. And in shipping, we see that is mostly ammonia that is going to be used, and in aviation, more or less more towards synthetic fuels. But also, I want just to point out that we are of course, following the technical advances and are open for our scenarios to change as we're seeing new technologies making a breakthrough. But also but a large part of the hydrogen is also to be used in industries, such as high heat industries.
I hope that answered your question. We got another one here from Jens Erik Helbo Andersen from Hydrogen Valley in Denmark. Does the report cover which regions needs to upgrade their grid, or is it more on a national level? It is the northern region of Denmark, where the grid is not big enough for the expanding sources of new renewables that is set to come in the future. So yes, my response would be that all these scenarios are based on national scenarios, which take this into account. In this report, we basically just compile them and give a holistic view from a Nordic perspective. But feel free if anyone else want to jump in there and give their point.
And maybe if we do it country by country, in Finland, the west coast is becoming a huge surplus area with all the wind power packing in. And that means we need more connections out of the west coast and towards south, where the most part of the consumption is. So there's a heavy need for north-south, and especially lines coming from, is it northeast? And we also have experienced those stability issues Antti was telling about in the west coast area, where there is a huge amount of converter-connected generation. So I would say that in Finland, west coast is the hot area. But please comment on the other countries.
Do we have anyone from Svenska Kraftnät? Daniel, maybe, are you with us? Or Mirela? Or Elis, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can just give a comment about from Svenska Kraftnät's perspective then. And yeah, I guess, I mean, the areas where we see, you know, that there will be the biggest increase of wind would be in SE1 and SE2 in the north. So yeah, there are ongoing projects to both increasing the transmission capacity between north and south, and also within SE1 and SE2. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Do Denmark and Energinet want to say something?
Nothing further than the ones that there are some issues both in the western and the eastern parts where we have to expand and yeah, be aware.
Any input from Statnett? This question.
In Norway they have been opened a few 2 areas in the southernmost price area in Norway, and which is open to auction, and the auctioning details are about to be settled. And there is a plan to open more areas, I think, in 2025.
Yeah. All right. I hope that answered your question. So basically, yes, we take it into account based on the national scenarios, I would say. And this is the result when you compile all these national scenarios, which also includes the needs for grid improvements or reinforcements. I hope this answered your question, Jens Erik. Mats Goldberg, floating wind project development at Sea Sapphire. Do the planned grid reinforcement and the developments support the connection of the large quantities of offshore wind that is predicted to be connected in the coming decades? It's more quite close to the question above. So I would again go back to saying that this is the compilation of the national scenarios, which includes the need and expected need for development on a national level, and we compile it here and get an overall view of where the reinforcements are located on a broader picture. I hope that is answering your question here. And at any time, anyone are free to jump in. Jussi, it looks like you want to say
I would
something.
add
Yes.
that these reinforcements shown on the map basically answer the needs for the next 10 years or so. And then a large-scale offshore wind connection is maybe happening a bit later on. The first ones during this period, but the most after that. So I would say that they are not included in the pictures. We cannot connect massive amount of offshore with those investments, that's for sure.
Good
And
clarification.
Yeah, and Mirella here, and I can add for the Sweden as well. We are looking at the both short and but long-term reinforcement needed for the offshore wind. And we have published a report last week about this, and where we see it will be appropriate and where you can connect the offshore parts. But otherwise, I agree with Jussi.
Okay, and then we have a question from Jakob Donner Annell. What is your view on cannibalization of renewable power prices? How big is the risk of halted development due to this? Who feels
Well, I can
ready
start.
to take on that?
Yeah.
Yes, Jussi.
So for sure, currently, it seems that the investment level for renewables is halting a bit. But one would guess that Nordics is a very attractive place to invest in new consumption. The power price is very low. And in the long run, I see the consumption for sure will increase and it will invite more power production. So there will be this development eventually. But we might have a short period of the time when everybody's waiting for the investment decisions by the big power consumers. But in my mind, Nordics is the best place to invest in, so why not?
Julie, did you want to add something there? Or no? All right. I hope that answered your question, Jacob. Then we have Tristan Hansen. You explained in your report that you will strengthen transmission grids or invest into wind and solar energy. But are there any plans for a Nordic sector coupling, meaning to strengthen the interconnection between electricity, gas, hydrogen, and heat sector? A very interesting question, I think. And maybe there, who feels eager to take that one on? I don't think it's something we cover in depth in the report. So it's a more general question to any of the higher up managers maybe present. Daniel Gustafsson or Jussi or maybe Mirella?
As we see it, it will be needed a sector coupling between heat and gas and electricity. But as you mentioned, it is not detailed in the report, but it will be needed for the optimal energy system. I'm not sure if I cannot see the whole question. So could you just repeat it?
Yes, it basically what you answered.
Okay, great.
So I think it is a quite good answer. We don't or treat that question very thoroughly in the report. But as Mirella says, I think it's a very interesting topic, coupling the sectors, and I think it's needed, as Mirella says, and I think we all think it's needed in long term to make the.
And in the Nordic Planning Group, we have identified this area, and what we started doing was comparing how we model this sector coupling, because we need to model it somehow to be able to plan the grid based on that. And that's maybe the starting point, to be able to model it in the Nordic level. Yes. But little by little, I guess in our next report, we will have more about that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope that answered your question, Tristan. And going down, I like a lot of questions coming in, so it's just keep going here. So this seems to be Esa Vakalainen again. Okay, thanks. So basically not hydrogen per se to transport by e-fuels, which is correct. Okay, so that's a follow-up to Julie, but not really a question, just the statement. Okay, then when a question about the report, chapter 2.3 states a massive need for flexibility. This was not mentioned much today. What is the main new source of flexibility foreseen? Industrial, DR, batteries, variable use of electrolyzers for H2, etc. Maybe this is something for Julie.
Yeah, I can start. So yeah, it's difficult to state one main source of flexibility, as we need the whole variety of different flexibility sources, which I tried to state in the presentation earlier. And also tech advancement will of course decide which source of flexibility that will be the largest, and we as the TSOs are not the ones to decide which technology is going to be the largest. So we are just following the technology advancement, but as we see it, we need a variety of different sources of flexibility.
Thank you. I think that was a great answer. And I hope you agree, Niklas. Then we have a more technical question, maybe for Antti, from Emil Hillberg. System protection schemes is mentioned as a solution within grid solutions in the chapter 343 of your report. Are the Nordic TSOs collaborating or planning to collaborate on developing and implementing new system protection schemes? Is there something you can say about that?
Yeah, I would say that there's no like Nordic cooperation on Nordic level system protection schemes currently, but it's utilized by the TSOs nationally. And for example, we are also looking at how those can be used in to enable like faster integration of renewables. So, but it's more on the national level, I would say.
Thank you. I hope that answered your question, Emil. Then we have one from Jussi Åkerberg. What kind of solutions do you think are most needed to increase the flexibility and stability of the grid coming from private sector companies? I would say maybe, Julie, do you think you want to reply to that one, or do we think that's on a more higher strategic level? Did we lose Julie?
Sorry.
No problem.
Julie.
Did you hear the question, Julie?
Sorry, no, I was. Could you repeat the question?
I'll read it again. Yes, sure, no problem. What kind of solutions do you think are most needed from the private sector to increase the flexibility and stability of the grid?
I think I could start, and maybe Antti will continue. From the private sector, the flexibility from the private sector is mostly connected to the flexibility of EVs as we see it, and automized flexibility options. So we don't reduce the welfare, or but have more automized solutions that provide flexibility to the system. As for the stability, maybe Antti could give an answer.
Yes, you are still on mute, Antti.
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, what's meant by private sector, so all the companies that are connected to the grid, or the manufacturers of the equipment, so basically needing better controllers, better tuning, more stable operation. And then how that is, so we need those from manufacturers of the grid connected solutions, but also the solutions built by TSOs, but also from the generating units, and in future also the electrolyzers will probably play a really big role, and there will be more stabilizing like requirements for the load side, which is currently kind of overlooked, and because we don't have such a huge consumption centers yet in the grid that are expected to be there in the future and having much more massive effect on system stability. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, I hope so too. You were also mentioning the peak power plants, and we also maybe see aggregating services and supplier of stability solutions to the TSOs, of course. But I hope that answers your question. You just see. Robert,
I would like to add that in the longer run, I see that hybrid type of connections where you have load, you have production, you have batteries, give more possibilities for flexibility. So the connection not only being solely production, solely consumption, solely batteries, but a combination of these will be needed.
Yeah, thank you. Someone is raising their hand, but I cannot find it because there's 248 people in the meeting. So I hope you just post your question in the chat instead. Is there anyone else who want to add anything on flexibility solutions to that question we got from our side? You can just unmute and talk. Otherwise, I will proceed to the next question. Okay. This is from Robert Niredi. The concept of data sharing for grid flexibility seems to have received relatively less attention compared to its potential significance in the energy sector to support TSO, DSO, and renewable investments. Yes. A statement with a question mark on it. How do we see the attention we've given to data sharing for grid flexibility in its compared to its potential significance in the energy sector? Does anyone spontaneously want to say anything about this? Do we have any? I would say it's nothing we cover in the report, in this report. And I think this is also more managed on a national level. So it's not something of a Nordic joint cooperation ongoing work. But I will take that question with us. Yes.
Yeah, if we have the perfect marketplaces and we openly all see the prices, so that should be the best way of data sharing. So the price should always reach all of the customers, and that would be the primary way of sharing data. So if we are lacking some kind of marketplace, then that's the place to start with.
Yeah. Anyone want to add anything to that question?
When it comes to optimization and of grid flexibility part, digitalization, data sharing will be crucial for getting all the possibilities that we can have from different flexible sources. So, well, I can just agree on that sentence. So.
Yeah, good. I agree as well. I think we're all looking at the net codes. We're all working on improving or living up to the laws, basically on data sharing. So it's an ongoing work for all the TSOs to reach the correct level just to fulfill the net codes when it comes to real-time data and structural data and plan data and so on. I mean, I think that's in parallel is an ongoing work that is being conducted on the national level, reaching that level where we need to be. So I hope that is answering your question. Magnus Torstensson, Will the TSOs present the long-term need for system services in a way that will provide sufficient information for the market to invest in necessary capabilities? Anyone feel ready to take on that one? I think this is also.
Yeah, this is not maybe a system planning issue. Of
yeah,
course,
I think this. I agree.
Maybe the regional group Nordic, the operational people are more working on the marketplaces or system services.
Yeah, I would say also still at the national level. I'm not sure. Maybe they could be looking further ahead on the agenda for Nordic cooperation, but not covered in this report or presentation at least. But I will take these questions down and I will see if I can answer them later on. Okay, 11:01. We still have a couple of minutes before we wrap this up. Very interesting work from Jonas Persson. Do you foresee new phenomena within the area of resonance stability and converter-driven stability that can be, for instance, local grid resonance, faster frequency dips than before, some new phenomena that need to investigate and find solutions for? I think that's maybe something for Antti.
Yeah, so
technical questions.
So in the report, we are introducing some of the examples what we have seen in the grid or in the studies related to these as well. Resonance stability is of a concern, especially in Finland and Sweden, where we have a high series compensation level on the transmission lines. With converter-driven stability, we are seeing those locally and also in large area. There's actually an example in the report where we saw on the west coast situation where more than 70 wind power plants were participating in a oscillation event during an exceptional outage. So yes, there will be new kind of we see that these new phenomena will become more common, and we need to tackle these issues.
Thank you. While you're on here, Antti, we got a new question for you from Yinfang Xiang. Could you please comment more on the balance between grid solutions, market-based solutions, and enhanced plant technical capabilities going forward to support power system stability? So far, we are seeing market-based solutions more focused on frequency stability products.
Yeah, so as shown in the presentation, I think all of those are relevant solutions that need to be taken into account, and they all have their benefits and challenges. So I think it needs more analysis on what's the best combination of those. We have seen these stability products in some countries like in UK and Australia, and we do study like how they are operating, how efficient these products are, and have a good communication with also those parties. So probably there will be more on this in the report next year, and I hope this answers the question.
Thank you, Antti. I hope you're happy in fun. Maybe a couple of more. We have Andreas Svensson on OX2. Interesting. Are you and how do you include a European power perspective and needs, even if it's a Nordic plan? Does anyone? My first instinct would be that the national scenarios and Nordic plan and 10-year NGDP plan are kind of working together in a joint way. So both the national scenarios, taking the European power market and power system into account. And this is also just a compiled version of these national plans, which kind of acts as a bridge towards the 10-year development plan on a European level. But feel free, I think yes.
Yeah, I think you are correct, Johan, on the planning side, and also on the stability study side. So there's work ongoing in the NSOE, and we have actually members in the team that are participating both the European work and the Nordic work, and we try to not do overlapping work and just benefit from it, the work on both sides. So it's supporting work. Actually, we jumped over one question there from Berhagen Vesta, so I think that was an interesting question. So maybe we can answer that as well.
Yes.
Are there any working group where vendors can participate, or are you interested in a shared group for this research and monitoring for the grid strength and voltage sensibility issues? And I think this is really interesting topic, and we have basically until now we have had these discussions every TSO by themselves with the vendors, for example. But that's a relevant question to have or to discuss whether we should have something on the Nordic level as well. So thank you for the good idea.
Great. Does anyone want to say anything else regarding Per Hagen question? Hope you're happy with the answer. And we move down. And this will be our last question. Rickard Nilsson, Energiföretagen Sverige, and the Swedish operator of nuclear power plants, has released a report that covers the need for an analysis and requirements when establishing converter connected generation close to nuclear power plants, aiming at building cooperation and securing maintained operational security in the power system. Has this report been considered in the Condon project? If not, I would recommend it to be considered. Yes, a long question, but or a short question, but a long wrapping of it.
So we have not discussed this just this report, but that is a relevant thing to take into account. For example, we do these studies or interaction studies with HVDCs and nuclear units, and it's the same is probably needed with the large scale paragonal interfaced generation in the region. So thanks for pointing that out, and we will have a deeper look into your report.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for participating, and I hope this presentation you found it useful, and I hope you found the report interesting. And this was all the time we had for today. I will note down the remaining questions, and we will later on publish a Q&A form where we actually reply to these questions. That's the plan. And I thank you all for participating again, and thanks to our presenters. They did an awesome job. So have a good day and take care, everyone.